I was 17 the first time the world went quiet around him. It was a rainy Thursday night mass at St. Anne's, and I should have been home cramming for my calculus exam. Instead, I sat in the back pew, tracing the hairline cracks in the marble floor and wondering whether God could hear how loudly my heart was beating. We had a new priest, young, thoughtful, with bright green eyes that didn't look past you the way most adults did. People in town called him that handsome shepherd. I didn't have a name for what he made me feel. Not yet. When Father Michael read the gospel, his voice landed slow and careful, like truth was fragile glass, and he didn't want to drop it. I gripped the pew so hard my fingers went numb. Something opened in me. Space. Breath. A place I hadn't known was locked. After Mass, I pretended to admire a stained glass window I'd seen my whole life just so I wouldn't have to leave. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He asked if I'd help sort donated paperbacks for the parish fundraiser. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Anything to stand longer in that warm, deliberate attention. That was the thread. The first one. I didn't know a web was being woven. I grew up in Briarfield. Population 6,000 on a census year and fewer after harvest. If you stood at the edge of Main Street, you could see cornfields, the water tower, the diner, the church steeple, and most of the people who would ever matter to you. The biggest annual event was the Strawberry Festival, unless you counted the yearly battle between my mother and Mrs. Turner over who could grow the bluest hydrangeas. I loved my town. I also wanted air bigger than it gave me. The sky sometimes felt like a lid. Father Michael felt like the opposite of that lid. He'd studied theology in Rome, quoted Augustine like other men quoted baseball stats, gave me a battered copy of the Confessions and a candy apple in the same breath. Food for the mind, food for the soul. No boy my age had ever remembered my name, much less the way I liked my coffee. He did both. He became my confessor, though I barely spoke in the booth. I'd sit there with my heart rattling like coins in a jar but say almost nothing. Too ashamed to confess envy of my prettier best friend. Too afraid to say I hated the smell of bourbon on my father's breath. Too lonely to admit I sometimes wished I belonged to another family. Father Michael would wait out the silence and say, "Sometimes the holiest prayer is the one we can't bring ourselves to speak. God hears the unsaid." I'd leave lighter, not forgiven, seen. On my 18th birthday, I found a card wedged under our front door. May you always know your worth in God's eyes. Inside was a pressed violet from the church garden. I taped it inside the top drawer of my dresser like contraband. That summer I volunteered at the parish youth retreat center up by Cedar Lake. 4 rooms, girls, boys, Father Michael, and Mrs. Hanley, our chaperone. The second night, Mrs. Hanley got a call. Her daughter was in early labor. She left. Storm clouds rolled in. At midnight, the fuse blew. I crept out half asleep, hands on the hallway wall, and met him in the dark, flashlight in hand. Our shoulders brushed in the narrow utility closet. Nothing happened. Something happened. I thanked him. He touched my arm, just above the elbow. Solid, steady, priestly, forbidden. "It's only a storm," he whispered. I should have stepped back. I didn't. I lay awake afterward listening to the rain flatten the lake and replayed that touch until dawn. The fuse was fixed. The world returned, but the compass in my chest spun off center. The weeks after that blurred. Errands for the rectory, Latin hymn translations, confessions that turned into conversations on the brick bench behind the sacristy. We never named the current pulling us together. Priests take vows. Girls like me keep rules. We learned to speak in parentheses. Half phrases. Long pauses. Eyes that dropped to the floor whenever silence thickened. One Sunday evening, he asked if I wanted to review Latin phrases used in Advent chants. We sat in his office, lined floor to ceiling with books. A lamp threw a warm pool of light across the desk. Snow threatened outside. Somewhere between Gloria and Miserere, our fingers touched over the same page. I could say I pulled away. I didn't. He exhaled like someone bracing before impact and threaded his fingers through mine. The pulse in my wrist answered his. Bells. All bells. I'm sorry, he said. For feeling or for showing it? I asked. He didn't answer. That night, I pressed my lips to the back of my own hand and pretended it was his. I prayed faster, more desperately. Not because I feared punishment, because I didn't know how to explain reverence wrapped in desire. Early December dusted the church steps in white. We stayed late decorating for Christmas. Pine garlands, white taper candles, red ribbons. Past 9, the town quieted under snow. I was on the altar rail tucking ribbon behind a pillar when I lost my footing. He caught me by the waist. We froze. Candlelight flickered across his face. My breath fogged the air between us. I looked up. Something broke open. Something that had been straining for months. I kissed him. Just once. Everything before and everything after hinged on that breath. He stepped back, eyes wide with horror, hunger, shame. We can't, he whispered, but he didn't remove his hands from my waist. I didn't go to Mass the following Sunday. My mother accused me of skipping. I told her I had cramps. She said I looked suspiciously radiant for a girl with cramps. I spent the afternoon rearranging books and writing Father Michael's name in a notebook only to scratch it out until the paper tore. Christmas Eve pulled me back. The church glowed gold and red. Incense hung thick. I hid in the back row. When people lined up for communion, he caught my eyes and held them a full heartbeat. After Mass, I waited until the last parishioner left. He was extinguishing candles when I whispered, "I shouldn't be here." He replied, "Neither should I." I don't remember crossing the aisle, only the sound of the sacristy door closing behind us. We didn't speak. He reached. I stepped. Fabric. Breath. His collar still at his throat. My hand against it. The question that had never been asked finally answered not in words but in the way our bodies found each other. Afterward, he wept. "I've broken everything," he said. I cupped his face. "You gave me something holy." Even as I said it, I knew. Holiness and ruin often wear the same face. We pretended nothing had happened. We failed. We were clumsy, abrupt, over-careful in public, over-bright in parish meetings, over-silent in the chapel. He distanced himself. His homilies hardened. Sacrifice, temptation, discipline. I felt flayed by every sermon. Then I started throwing up. At first, I blamed a stomach bug. Then the smell of coffee made me gag. My period never came. I bought a test in the next town over, paid cash, took it in the church restroom before choir practice, and watched 2 pink lines bloom like wounds. Pregnant. My knees buckled. I sat on the tile, back against the stall door, heart thundering. I touched my flat belly and whispered, "Hello." That's when I cried, soft, choking, half laughter, half terror. I didn't tell him that day. I carried the secret a week, went to Mass, folded bulletins, practiced hymns, hid nausea with peppermint, held my abdomen like an afterthought every time I walked past the statue of Mary. Finally, I asked him to meet me in the side chapel after Thursday confessions. He came in tired, dark circles under his eyes. I said, "I'm late." He said, "Mass ended an hour ago." I said, "I'm not talking about Mass." He sat. "You're sure?" I nodded. He pressed his palms together until his knuckles whitened. Dear God. I told him I wasn't asking for absolution. I just needed him to know. After a long silence, he whispered, "We'll find a solution." I said, "I already did. I'm keeping her." He didn't argue. He didn't comfort me. He pulled back into a clerical mask I'd never seen so firmly fastened. From then on, he was polite, distant, painfully correct. My volunteer slot disappeared from the bulletin. Parish ladies stopped calling. Mrs. Hanley told me the youth program was being restructured. I understood. I was being erased. Every Tuesday, I found a plain envelope tucked behind the statue of St. Joseph in the rear transept. No name. Just cash. First enough for prenatal vitamins, later enough for doctor visits. His handwriting appeared once on a folded pharmacy receipt. Please take care of yourself. That was how he loved me now. Through shadows, through envelopes, through absence. I both loved and hated him for it. My mother found the sonogram photo in my nightstand when I was about 14 weeks along. She slammed the drawer, held the picture inches from my face, and asked, "Who?" She guessed a boy from school, then a cousin's friend. I almost let her pick a name. "It was Father Michael," I said. She slapped me, not hard, enough to redraw the lines between us. "Don't lie about a priest," she hissed. But she knew I wasn't lying. Mothers recognize the tone that lives beyond invention. By dinner, the silence in our house roared. By morning, the grocery store had heard. That afternoon, the whole town had. One woman dropped a basket of apples when I walked by. Another crossed herself. A third asked in a whisper if I was keeping it. I said, "I'm keeping her." She didn't meet my eyes again. 3 days later, Father Michael was gone. No farewell mass, no direct explanation. The bishop read a short statement. Father Michael has requested a leave of absence for personal reflection and spiritual renewal. Reflection. Renewal. I sat in the pew with my palms pressed over the small rise beneath my dress and thought, what about me? That night I found the last envelope under St. Joseph. Inside, cash and a slip of paper. "Forgive me. I failed you both." I crawled into bed and cried until morning. Winter thawed. My belly grew. The women who had once asked me to bake pies for the church fundraiser now avoided my aisle at the market. At my baby shower, organized reluctantly by my aunt, only 3 people came. We played no games. We ate sheet cake. My mother kept her eyes red but dry. She wrapped her arms around me at the end, not to reconcile, but because, I think, she remembered me as a baby too. I labored 22 hours in July heat. My mother held one hand. A nurse held the other. When they placed my daughter on my chest, she blinked up at me like the first sunrise after a long storm. I named her Lily. I whispered, "You are not a sin. You are my salvation." She did not look like him, not really. But when she slept, she furrowed her brow the way he did when translating Latin. Sometimes I watched her breathing and felt grief and gratitude fight in my throat. He never called. Not when she was born. Not when she smiled. Not when she had croup and we spent the night in the ER. I wrote him letters I never sent. I almost drove to the diocesan office twice. I didn't. I was already a single mother. Naming it didn't change that. Year 1 with Lily was milk, sweat, debt, and fierce, aching love. I worked part-time shelving returns at the library. My mother babysat when she could. People stared less as months passed. Scandal ages fast in small towns when new gossip arrives. Still, some glances never softened. I kept every envelope he'd ever left, even the empties. Sometimes, on the worst nights, I'd take them out and stack them in order, as if the paper could prove I hadn't imagined him. Eventually, I put them in a shoebox and taped it shut. 2 years after he left, I saw him at the pharmacy. Lily had an ear infection. I was tired, hair in a knot, trying to remember the dosage instructions. He stood in the vitamins aisle reading labels like a man who had nowhere urgent to be. He wore civilian clothes. He looked smaller. Or maybe I finally occupied my own gravity. He didn't notice me at first, When he did, the blood left his face. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I kept walking. At checkout, I heard him behind me. Please. Just that. One word. Too full. I didn't turn. Her name is Lily, I said. She likes strawberries and hates bedtime. She's learning to say thank you, but not goodbye. I guess she got that from me. He exhaled like something inside him tore. I never stopped loving you, he said. I turned then. And yet you left me in the fire while you searched for your redemption, I said. He nodded. I was weak. No, I said. You were afraid. I had to be brave for both of us. He asked if he could see her sometime. I told him no. Not because I wanted to punish him, because she needed steadiness, not ghosts. I owed her a whole mother more than I owed him a second chance. That night I opened the taped shoebox, held each envelope, and realized they no longer hummed with electricity. They were paper, history. I burned them in the fireplace, one by one, and thanked him silently for the parts of me that survived him. Lily turned 5 last spring. She paints rainbows on junk mail and sings lullabies to our dog. She's never asked who her father is. One day she will. I'll tell her the truth, not every detail, but the one that matters. She was born out of something complicated and human, but never out of anything less than love. She is not shame. She is evidence that truth survives. We don't go to St. Anne's. We attend a small church with creaky floors and worn hymnals 3 towns over. The pastor there never hurries communion. No one whispers when I walk in. Sometimes I light a candle for the life I almost had. Sometimes I light one for his. Most Sundays I just sit with Lily's warm weight pressed against my side and breathe. If you're still listening, maybe you see yourself here. Maybe you loved someone you weren't supposed to love. Maybe you trusted a person with authority who crossed a line. Maybe you're raising a child alone and telling the world you're fine when you're so tired you taste metal. I need you to hear me. There is no shame in being broken. The only shame is believing you must stay that way. I was a girl who fell in love with a man who represented God. I became a woman who learned the difference between faith and obedience, between devotion and disappearance. Love can feel holy. Real holiness does not ask you to vanish. You deserve to be seen, fully, fiercely. And if someone walks away when you needed them most, that is not the measure of your worth. It is the map of their absence. To every woman who loved too hard, stayed too long, trusted too deeply. To every soul who was told her voice was too loud, too much. To every mother raising a daughter in a world that still tries to dim her. This story is yours too. Write it, speak it, burn the envelopes if you have to. Keep the violet if you want to. May you end your story on your own terms. May you refuse the cage. May you know, down in your bones, that you are not a prisoner of your past. You are the author of your freedom. Thank you for listening to mine. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment below and tell me. When did you realize someone else's love was chaining you? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. We speak the things no one said out loud in town. We heal by confessing. You're not alone anymore.